Hello and welcome to Stock and Roll, the podcast where we deep dive into the world of equity compensation. Today we're recording live from Teuchters Bar in Edinburgh, so there will be quite a lot of noise in the background, but let's just look at it as charming. This is one of the most honest conversations yet, and we look unfiltered into why equity plans sometimes deliver and sometimes disappoint. I'm joined by Nigel Watson, Partners for Incentives at Burge Salmon, who has spent decades advising companies on how to structure, communicate, and defend equity programs. And also David Edwards, Head of Corporate Secretariat and Shareholder Services at NatWest's. In this episode, we dig into where plans actually break and how to communicate the balance between risks and upside. Let's dive in. Here for another episode of Stock and Roll. This time I'm in Edinburgh at Teuchters Bar, and I'm here with
two non-Scottish people.
Yeah, with two non-Scottish people. We're here with Nigel from Burge Salmon and with David from NatWest's. Today we will go a bit into a more of a generic version, a bit of talking about share plans and the value of it, and we will try to challenge a bit of the common elements with share plans. And it's so cool to do that, actually being on a pub. Now we're not just simulating a pub. So if you guys start off with introducing yourself, do you want to start perhaps, Nigel?
Yeah, happy to. Welcome to our church. This is where David and I spent many happy hours shooting the breeze about share plans. It was nice. You could eavesdrop. And thanks for inviting us to this. Yep. So I head up the incentives practice at Burge Salmon. We're a law firm, full service law firm. And practice we run is everything to do with how you pay people. I try and push out quite a bit of material thought. Well, it goes under the guise of thought leadership, but it's my way of sort of agitating people to think a bit differently, which is, I'm pleased to join this podcast, and let's see if we can cover some new ground.
Cool. Great to have you here.
So David there, so I've been at NatWest's for nearly 15 years. So NatWest's is a large UK retail bank. I've been involved in the share plans way for many years. So not first time share plan discussion, but first time podcast. So definitely looking forward to having a good conversation in maybe a little bit of a different way, and surfacing some maybe controversial, but certainly interesting views.
It won't be controversial. This is share plan.
Yeah. So if you start off then a bit like generic and saying like in your minds, why does equity plans sometimes work and sometimes disappoint in your views?
Nothing like a small question to start with, isn't it? Well, look. There's a lot that goes on with share plans, isn't there? You've got a whole ecosystem of different things going in there. And I think a lot of the time they overpromise, rather people don't break down sort of constituent parts of what it is to give equity. So, if you really drill down, what is equity, for example? What is ownership? And I think certainly companies that I deal with, parts I deal with, they sort of see this as almost self-executing. You throw out the word ownership, you throw out the word, alignment, and somehow magically these things will take care of themselves. I think a lot of people don't properly interrogate really the constituent bits of what it is to offer a share. Not even structurally or the tax or instrument itself, but just the whole end-to-end story.
Yeah.
So I think it breaks. It doesn't break in a good news. When the plan is doing well, when the stock is rising, when you exit well, happy day.
Yes.
The bit that always fascinates me, and why I think it breaks, is when it doesn't go to plan. And that's when it's under pressure. And that's when I think you test the raw meat of whether you've got a good share plan or one that can adapt to a plan. But I think often, I guess that's a long-winded way of saying, I think it's because the story doesn't kind of hang together. Maybe it's oversold, maybe the instrument isn't quite right, maybe the outputs aren't quite, sufficient enough in a difficult time. And there's a lot.
I think to talk about the story, and I think that we're often wanting the story as practitioners from different perspectives, lawyers, starts and ends with the participant. Sometimes we can lose sight of that. I think I've seen, books about when share plans were up, when share plans don't work. Sometimes things are outside of your control. You don't know what the stock price is going to do. You hope that good things will happen, but not always. Certainly in that during the back, right after the financial crisis, not after 2008, it's been a bit of a roller coaster journey in terms of our own stock. All sorts of external factors that have impacted it. We've had external factors that have impacted the way that we do equity in the bank, and to see that evolve over the last 15 years has been super interesting. But the bit that remains core and common, I think, is this idea that simple and trite, but you just need to start and finish with a participate or create a price.
I think it's a bit like if you look at an early stage company and a founder, he or she will work everything he or she can to make it work. If things go bad, they will perhaps work even harder to save it, right? And then you have the full opposite. When you have a very, very big company with a lot of employees, of course, you can't say that one participant will have the same impact as that founder. But somewhere along that road, there's between those two kind of points there, you will lose it a bit. And then I think it's very interesting to understand a bit like, what are the things that motivates the people that are motivated also in downturns of the market? How can you kind of take those things in and then lift it up so it's actually scalable to a bigger scale, like understanding, kind of getting the crowd together on pulling through a difficult situation, right? I think it's super difficult, so I don't have the right answer to it, but like there's something in a smaller company and some aspects you could learn from perhaps and try to simulate in a bigger one.
How do you harness something that's happening in a colony of 50 people to a company of 50,000?
It's super difficult, but I think still it's a bit like open communication. We don't want to spoil the entire podcast, but there's a lot of things here that you can work with in order to at least, you won't make it the same for sure, not possibly, but you can at least like use and learn a few.
There's a funny way to words here. Adversity is in. So one of the things that you forget about David Bagg is it's been rubbish going through all those early days, the dark days of public ownership, and you really had to work hard in the bank of getting those, winning hearts and minds, turning the ship around. And so you really had to go into that dark place to work out what is the employment engagement? What's the EVP? How do we get people tuned into what then, David, was a very static share price? It was on its knees. And now it's what? Has bubbled around £7.
Yeah, last week we hit £7, yeah. And just for kind of those that are less familiar than that story, I think when I first started with Bank, subject to a few stock consolidations of all the racers and that, by the share price was down by 20p. So there's some significant change of value, but certainly that's the place we were coming from. Right?
Not many big institutions have gone through that adversity.
I think that's right, and I think it does kind of permeate through to how we do things today, when things are maybe going a little bit better, and share out later on, what that means, and for us potentially it kind of means that we do things a little bit differently, and we're arguably a lot bit more conservative than some companies would be. I think for justified.
And if we were to try to kind of dive a bit deeper into kind of the negative sides of it, so how do you see, or where does it usually break? Where do you think companies are not doing a good job?
I don't think I personally don't have a single answer. There's no single answer.
Mm-hmm.
Look, my philosophy, or I've done this for that reason, is that you have a story, great, we're going to get equity, then you have an instrument, whatever that looks like, and often it's got a wrapper of tax around it. And then you have the output, which is hopefully I'm going to make some money out of this. Cannot probably break any point. It probably breaks where the story is overpromised. It probably breaks where the instrument, which by the way, particularly if you're doing all the plumbing and the tax part, is horrendously layered. Because you're doing all, particularly in private companies, all the different, investor rounds and task shares. So it can break there because you're trying to meld in this really complicated something to a very simple story. People think they're getting and what the promise was. And then finally you have the output, which is economics essentially, which is, well, I didn't know I was going to get as little as that.
Yeah.
Because what they didn't appreciate is all the economics and how it all stacks up with other investors coming in.
Yeah.
So I think it can break at any one of those points.
Yeah.
I guess both your challenge back to me, well, how do you solve for that? And I think it is very difficult to solve that other than being very well aware of the lifeline, your end-to-end point, David. You know, the life story, and being very robust with your governance and your messaging.
Yeah.
Do you think that, Nigel, we make things too complicated in the middle of that? And you know where I'm going. I mean, I don't know how many classes of shares do you need, right, to put in place a share plan that works. But we seem to end up with arrangements that can be really challenging to explain, difficult to implement, complicated from a tax perspective. And I go back to my point at the start of organization. You're putting yourself in the cop. Let's be honest, right? We do this for a living, all three of us.
Yeah.
You know, we spend a lot of time talking about it. We understand the words and the terminology, but most people don't. So have we perhaps, as an industry, inspired to be? And I'm not certainly not pointing fingers, advisors, administrators, or companies, but have we in our kind of share plan ecosystem, our very nice industry that we all kind of love being a part, made things more complicated than they should be?
Well, it's not just the instrument though. So in PLC land, of course, often it's just one class of shares. And so at one level, the instrument's very straightforward. How you layer that with equity wrappers, all the rest of it is a different thing. But where, particularly in your the regulation, the regulatory aspects of operating share plans is.
I don't think I could blame the legal advisors.
But it sounds a bit like kind of when we discuss like where does it go wrong, it comes a bit down to like simplicity and communication, and those things may be more common to go wrong than if you look at like from a legal or a compliance or a system or so. Do you think like the most common place where you do mistakes is like in simplicity and communication?
Yeah, that's for a bad eye. So Dave and I talk about this a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of people ban the term communication, education around. I think the correct word should be comprehension.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think comprehension, which is another order, another layer down from education, is being the West Coast. The tech bros have a saying, kind of radical candor. I think being very upfront, blunt to people about how these work. Yeah. Which is nice to say around in the pub as we are now. And as David said, we're all kind of well healed in this. It's difficult, isn't it, to have a blunt conversation with people about the realities of it. But I do think that is important.
It is.
I think you're right. I mean, and I think we all probably start off with that kind of understanding. That's what we're trying to achieve. But I think along the way it gets diluted. It could be diluted because of legal and regulatory considerations for the conservative, or maybe even a little bit overly optimistic in the way that you communicate others or your intended outcomes. I think candor is right, but actually sort of sitting there and being able to send a candid communication out to 60,000 people is more difficult. I mean, maybe you can do that in a room if you've got 50 people in your organization and you can have a really good conversation about different perceptions of value. I may perceive this is worth this because of my personal circumstances or my personal outlook to risk, or how I view the prospects of the company.
It's a concept of a belief contract.
Yeah.
The idea is that a founder is essentially selling belief, isn't he? That how you tack on essentially the equity proposition to that belief story is almost incidental because he's selling beliefs. Yeah. Do you believe in me? Very difficult. You're right. Very difficult for a founder in that scenario to start talking about the negatives.
Well, we've got a founder here, so I mean.
Yeah. But I think this is super interesting because it's like we often say that when we do recruitment, right? That we need to kind of make sure that the candidate see what we see. That's very, very important, because if you don't manage that, most likely you will not be attractive when you kind of compete versus others. And of course, understanding that's a huge difference from like a company our size and a big corporation. But I still think it's all about like, how do you find the best way of communicate the right amount of upside and risk? And that can be different in different cases, but like still you need to address it with that way. Risk, yes, if you invest your own money, you need to know that it's risk, because otherwise we're dealing with extremely, and not meaning to offend anyone, but we're generally dealing with quite unqualified investors if you compare it with kind of other investment vehicles that people invest into. So you need to help. There's a responsibility in helping and understanding that risk. And how do you balance that with there's smart potentially to invest into this, right? And I think finding that balance and really opening up on that there's different aspects in this, I think it's super difficult and very, very important to do it the right way.
I admire you for trying to go there with that. It's probably very difficult.
It is. I think it's, and especially like when we talk about a big company, it's like one of the companies that I remember helping 3, 4, 5 years ago. They didn't have anything on risk when we started, right? So they were investing their own money and they didn't have anything on risk. And then we kind of needed to build up that playbook from scratch. Okay, people are investing their money here, and people have heard talks in the cantina that last year people have made quite a lot of money on their programs. If that is the training they get, and then they put money into it, this was a stock listed company, then you need to change it. Because many will then think that, yeah, they earned money last year, let's just do that because it's smart.
One thing everyone gets hung up about is financial advice. Is the employer giving financial advice, view or guidance? And I would always say to my clients, well, sorry, I push the envelope a bit because, not quite what's the harm, and I'll get shot by every lawyer listening to this now, but, I do think that pushes, it goes to the psychology, the sort of apathy or inertia of many people. They don't really understand this profile.
That's so impaired.
But there's a certain paternalism that's crept into the workforce these days, and I do think it's incumbent upon employers to give a bit of a nudge in a direction, but you still do bump up against that challenge of, you're giving financial advice.
Well, to a couple of things. I mean, the first thing, to go back to what Chris was saying, I mean, I think the word risk means different things to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And there's certainly in certain segments a very negative connotation to the word risk, particularly in relation to equity. But yet, segments of your workforce will be out kind of buying Bitcoin and investing.
Yes.
So
that's right.
Absolutely
right.
There's some distance there that I've not quite reconciled at the moment, but just throw that out there. I mean, the concept of risk, and I think to something you made earlier, Nigel, comprehension of risk is pretty low. The sort of the advice, guidance, kind of classic debate. I mean, my sort of personal view is that companies often put employees into a position where they're in these arrangements. Sometimes they choose to participate. Sometimes kind of that choice is kind of a real choice, but we often companies chasing participation targets and very early percentages, and whether people are making the correct choices to go into certain arrangements is a different debate. But my view is, if you're running, say you're in the UK and you've got an SAYE plan and you've got 50, 60, 70% of your work and I understand the sort of to ensure that level of second nature is there. And if you need a little bit of radical to ensure that exists, I think that's your responsibility. And the risk that you can do that without kind of stray. You used the words nudge. I'm not sure I would say nudge, but I think it's about and delivered in a clear and accessible way that is interesting and engaging. It doesn't need to be boring. I love talking about concentration risk. I love talking about diversification.
And what do you do there on diversification? Do you kind of, as a company, do you have any kind of things you do?
Yeah, so we do, and this is an interesting debate for us, right? So, we're a financial services organization. We've got a relationship with real estate customers as well. So the way I kind of thought, how would we treat our customers? And more parallels can we draw between our customers and our employees? I'm not a financial advisor, so I would never put myself out there as being able to give financial advice. However, if you've got a large multiple of salaries sitting there on a single stop line, an independent financial advisor is quite likely to come and tell you that you should probably think about spinning off into something else. What do you use that value for? What are your future plans in terms of your wealth accumulation and creation? And certainly we take a view on sort of segments of the workforce very generally, not specifically. We have some data, but we're very carefully use and interpret that data. But we have a reasonably good idea if someone's likely to be a concentrators in NatWest, and we do kind of we do kind of make people aware of that. We work ex people, we signpost other resources,
Nice.
interesting articles. Like, hey, you know, just because you're thinking about selling doesn't necessarily mean that you're not buying into the story. It's sensible risk management.
It is.
So I think it's an interesting area, and the accumulation consistently. I mean, I think maybe share plans can be the victim of their early successes, right?
Could that be something you design into a program as well, saying that the moment you get above 2x your base salary, you are being, you can't participate, or you need to spend half of it at someone else, or kind of somewhere else, or is it something you've done there, or is it more like kind of advice?
It's a really interesting one. I wouldn't say advice, I might say guidance, but in terms of hardwiring, things like that, and I think that's where maybe gets a bit more difficult. Everybody's circumstances are different. Maybe they have a wealth and income, different appetites towards risk. I mean, you could certainly
in terms of creating genuine wealth, a single stop line or real concentration could be the way to achieve material wealth. So there's that bit to balance in a fund. I kind of reminded of the Warren Buffett quote where he said, you know, put all your eggs in the basket, but make sure you watch that basket like a hawk.
I think that's spot. I mean, you know, I'll see your Buffett and I'll raise you Einstein, right? Compounded is the most powerful.
Well, there's a debate. It's a debate whether that should be attributed. I'll give you.
But then I think it comes back to, for some people, it may well be correct to hold a single stock client. What I want is for people to actively make that decision, and if that's right, fine.
Sorry, because I was interrupting you.
No. You're yeah.
No, I agree. I think the diversification point is fascinating, and to get all technical. I mean, I remember when I was at Barclays, and I do think, and this is not for now, this is me going off on one, but I do wonder whether hybrid instruments could be an interesting development. And I've never really I have given thought to it, and I haven't quite worked out whether I can sell that as a proper incentive structure.
So in the downside scenario, equity would converge to security.
So, you know, and we explored this at Barclays. But though, I just think, coming back to creativity, if you think about my blocker, which is the instrument in the middle of the story, it can trip lots of people up, but also could it help or enhance, depending on how you make it ebb and flow, flex to what's going on. I throw that out there only because it's something I've been using.
I think that, like, what could be a world here is that you don't need to be kind of at the wealth management size and value, but when you kind of have been a part of a program for X time, you could get easy access to automated material where you could learn about like other activas. You could kind of do it in the same place, and you could kind of diversify or get some guidance on how you do that, a bit more interactive than someone having to give them a call and check up, right? Because I think this is a part of a responsibility that comes both from a potential administrator in the long run, but also the employer, right? That it's something here that you can work on making a bit easier accessible, because it's a bit counterintuitive to go out and say don't invest everything into your share plans, right? It's the administrators for sure don't have an incentive in that, and also potentially the employer, right? It depends on who it is.
Box that off. I do think it's a great point you make, that we as advisors, you as an issuer, we all get hung up on risk, and we talk about it in these sort of sacred terms. And then, as you rightly pointed out, you've got a youngster on there trading 2-on-2 account, their Coinbase account, trading all manner of risky stuff. There is a disconnect there, and yet we don't surface it enough.
I have a few kind of, call it sayings, myths versus reality. I'd like to kind of hear your immediate reactions, and nothing's wrong here. So the first one, I'll say, like, it's tax efficient, so it's good. What do you think then?
Don't get me started. But you know, a good outcome happens regardless of what's whether the tax benefits. Yes, you might keep more of the tax benefit, but as somebody once said to me, you know, a good plan is one that pays out, and a bad plan is one that doesn't. Yeah, and that's almost regardless of the tax wrapper. Okay, so tax again, I think it's a cohort thing. Negotiating, as do many times, David, I'm sure similar with senior hires. often tax surfaces pretty early in the discussion.
Yeah.
And you almost build the instrument around what they want from a tax point of view. And that isn't just, and that must be cross-border because their base tax isn't over there, they're working over here. So tax for some cohorts, very important. But I guess I'm going to default to the rather cliche, you don't let it wag the dog too much. Tax is an optimization layer, essentially. It helps turbocharge returns, all great and good. But I don't think you necessarily start there. And also, to throw something out, many of my clients are quite ignorant about tax rates and tax levels. So you could talk about tax to the cow come home. You took it all at the start of the plan. Maybe if you're lucky enough, you're unwinding it at the end. A lot of them don't have a Scooby, or it comes as a nice surprise. But all the tax is as low as it is.
You think it's
But tax also adds complication. Okay, remember also that I think a lot of our industry, certainly the advisory industry, starts from the tax. Because they're tax lawyers, they're CTA qualified, they're this, they're that. That's the bit that gets you piling on tax, and they forget about the behavioural side, the economic side, the comms side, the comprehension side.
So if you have to prioritize, I'll make a plan that is tax efficient or a plan that is easy, understandable, and you can only choose one.
It's a great question.
Well, which one's going to deliver?
That's out of the equation. You have to choose one of them.
I'm going to go for the tax.
You do that. Yeah. How about you?
I'm going to go the other way just to be contrarian. I mean, to the point I was chatting about earlier. I mean, a lot of this comes down to storytelling, clarity of message, and I'm completely. Nigel's particularly around the kind of executive level arrangements and that kind of modules, but everything to do with tax is just hard. If the purpose is to try and get people to engage, but actually you spend 2/3 or more of whatever communications that you're putting out talking about tax.
And of course, it's a lot of details in that question, but it's kind of, I think I agree with you. If you don't understand it, and if you kind of go out it, yes, you earned a lot of money when it was done and it was tax-wise better. I'd say, like, at least from an employer side, I understand maybe from the employee side, but it's like generally from creating the plan side, I would have said that I would vote for that side of communication and making it simple to understand if I had to. But it's hard. So
you go first.
So here it is. We have clawback, so we are protected.
Oh wow. Well, are we what the number one network into rules and the contractuals in place? I think there's a separate question about actually what are the mechanics to make that work in the real world. I would suggest that a lot of people have the former, but the latter is probably less. Is it a real driver? And in terms of protection,
it's governance hygiene.
I mean,
I mean, well, I would finish off your question. By saying, if I remember it rightly, is something like, we got clawback. Are we protected? To which I would add from downside or from reputational risk. Okay. Best thing, like in the early days, because remember, clawback's a relatively new thing. And I remember when it came out, because you had in the aftershock of the financial crash, the G20 all got together in about 08, it must have been 09, 010, and thrashed out the remuneration principles which underpin most of our financial regulatory remuneration system, and of which clawback made it a principle, or mouse of clawback. But I never forget talking to the chairman of the time, a Remco chair, and he said to me, Nigel, he said, I'm going to want it, aren't I? I said, well, why is that? He said, because if it's on my watch, I want to be able to say to the press, I've done everything I can to get this one right. So I think we're protected from the optics, perhaps as much as you can be from the Daily Mail headlines. It's never going to be perfect. David's absolutely right to mention the legal mechanics. It's often never foolproof. And it doesn't make us travel well.
No. Agree.
You said that much more succinctly than I did.
Yeah.
I'm like Guinness. Was Guinness supposed to travel well or not?
I don't know.
Let's ask the.
I think we're on to our next round.
Yeah. On how many do you give out or include in your programs? So here it's also a myth versus reality. Like we can give everyone ownership. How do you feel about that? Like where do we limit? How broad do you go? Is it good to get everyone?
I would say yes. I mean, there's a question about is it real and meaningful ownership, and particularly in a large listed corporate. But I think that freer in terms of the hygiene factor. Everybody's got some skin in the game on it a bit. It creates a different mindset. Pretty fat. The mindset is just checking the share price monkey. Just have it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so again, I think it stratifies depending on whether you're to PLCs and private companies. I mean, I buy into the whole cult of equity. Generally. I see it as a force for good. I think that every employer probably should be mandated. Above a certain threshold to allow employees to hold a stake in the business. Equity gives you an upside. You may not know where that upside comes good. It may come to zero.
Yeah.
But at least you've got the benefit potentially of serendipity coming good for you.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see it. I mean, there's a big push. I think they might be closer to me than this. That there's a big push in the UK to try and replicate America in terms of the sort of stock ownership.
Yeah.
And the levels of stock ownership, individual stock ownership in America is huge, and the awareness and the appetites. And there have been attempts by this gang to try and replicate that or kickstart it. But following the whole privatisation in the 80s, the whole Tell the Sid campaign, we've kind of gone backwards. So I guess what I'm saying is there's a shout out from a band way to say, I'd like to have it all widespread. I think there are. David's close to David's heart, but we could dust off the SIP and SAYE, which are all employee arrangements, and make them more accessible and better. Reduce holding periods. So from your question correctly, I'm all in terms of trying to make it as widespread as possible. Stratification between the cohorts and layers. But I think you opt out of it and you opt in.
Yeah. You see some cases where you would say that in your mind it wouldn't make sense to include everyone. Like let's say it's a growth company, they have 1,000 employees, they're non-listed, and if someone said like, okay, it's really 50 out of these 1,000 that we can't kind of live without, and we just need to give them everything we can, so we can't go broader than 50 out of 1,000. Do you kind of buy into that, or would you say then you do both? Or
that's not unusual, what that picture scenario you've painted. I mean, when you talk about divvying up the equity anyway within a startup, or anyone going from startup to Series B and beyond, there's always a sort of, well, how do I divvy up the options pool, equity pool for employees? And unless you're very, very generous, it is only kept to the tight core delivery team. I would say if you go wider than that, that's all about largesse and being paternal, and a lot depends on the particular characteristics of that startup. So I guess that kind of makes sense to me. That said, a tokenistic something. I don't mean that to demean or belittle, but that shows you gratitude.
Yeah, I'd like to be purist about it.
Yes.
But I think Nigel's alluded to it, but there's all sorts of practical and commercial reasons why that might not make a lot of sense in the circumstances. So I would maybe my starting point would be, yes, we should, but what are the reasons that might lead us to pause in the particular circumstances? So pragmatic ideas.
Because also in a startup, the guys, girls that really carry the business probably could earn more else.
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's always like case by case, but you see it now also back to US, right? There's more and more, even though the private equity owned companies that typically have done like MIPs to kind of the top people, they also go with another vehicle perhaps, but a broader plan where they include everyone. So I think it feels a bit that it's a trend of also where it's historically been like a 5%.
No one's touched on it.
Yeah.
I don't know yet.
Ah.
But generally, I think there's generational guilt play.
Yeah.
I've been talking to some Lord people, and he was bemoaning the fact that one of his divisional managers was doling out loads of big, hefty bonuses and pay rises. What the hell are you doing? And he was close to retirement. He said, well, I've done so well here because my DB pension scheme has done very well. You know, the stock price has done very well over 25 years that I've been here, boy and man. And I just feel guilty that these youngsters can't kick on. The generation bit spinning around.
Yeah, I think there's downside in not doing it as well. Even if it's just optically in perception for that cool. I mean, you know, I wonder about perception and whether perception and expectation are created because you were all reading the papers about, you know, Silicon Valley startups and this kind of culture of ownership. So, I mean, I wonder whether your challenge is if you don't do it, whether you can actually kind of attract
the right people. I agree. Oh, for sure. And then it doesn't always go the way a company plan when you issue stocks. The share price may go down, there may be a crisis and so are there anything that companies could do in order to survive real world situations where it's not like just that easy?
It's not, you can't stop it.
Nope.
It's going to happen at some point. Being prepared for it. I guess there's a slight tendency to be head in the sand when it happens. Having what comes back to is the conversation and the comms. But that, a lot of the time, because it's having those really gritty conversations. But not everybody is equipped to do that. I guess what I'm saying, that's code for saying, I can't think of a structural, neat way to deal with it. There's no levers I can think of technically that I can pull. In times of distress, convert, you know, that help ward off the downside. There's no downside, but unless you're doing mitigation.
Free shares and so there you go.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's some certain scenarios could be quite difficult in some situations, but I actually think it comes back to kind of that comprehension point. Down cycles, you know, bull bear markets, which, you know, that's a thing. The economic cycle is
and rare.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, it depends how familiar you are with that, but you know, simple concepts that explained and well understood amongst the workers could potentially, you know, don't rush for the exit door necessarily. Perhaps, you know, the way you can ensure people make good decisions around that is to just ensure that they've got that kind of broader, holistic view, and you know, it's not just hit the panic button straight away.
But would this be like a preventive thing that you need to communicate from start, or do you also have a layer of treating it when it happens? So let's say that we had a new 2009 financial crisis came now, and in NatWest, you typically then go out and send out proactively something, or would it be like how can you work when it's?
It is. I think it would be very difficult to be seen to be reactive in those situations. So I think if that is
something, it would be different. If it came around again, the levels of fraternalism and the engagement would be higher now.
What do you think people would do?
I think that people would own it more. I think genuinely the business, depending on your sides, would kick into gear better and own it more and have a more blunt conversation with everybody what it means. Because ultimately, stock collapsing value is one thing. It's often a harbinger for job losses.
I mean,
it's really code for that offers, or that in a properly stressed situation. And that's where the reassurance comes in, isn't it? As David said, markets come and go, but we can reassure you on the job front. Maybe throw a bit of cash at it. You know, not a daft idea. To at least acknowledge why you're using the cash, as opposed to just a blanket have some cash. Maybe a very targeted bonus, a survival bonus, or what you want, make good bonus. I don't know. But I do think the spots be very different now, because I think
we think very different. Certainly see kind of. If I think about COVID, right? There was definitely different companies approached that differently to what they would have done anyway.
I think we don't need to kind of go further down there, but I think it's also very interesting the difference here between a listed company where you see it immediately on the share price versus if you're kind of a private equity owned company where it's kind of not visible in any sense for anyone because it's like no live feedback from the market or anything. And then if you're a company without a share price, do you then communicate anything at all, or are you just kind of secretly going more and more and more out of the money / lost money on stuff, and then it suddenly comes to live at some point? Do you own the message a bit there as well? It's super difficult, and I think it's a bit the same, that it's hard to do it, but it's also super interesting.
If you're listed, you've probably got a more demanding, I think you've got a more demanding audience because it's shareholders as well. Probably big institutional shareholders also want part of the conversation. So that is different.
Yeah, I guess the other end, there's a risk of a vacuum, right? So,
Yeah, it is.
And it is more difficult. I mean, we often talk about sort of long-being regular communications, particularly long-dated programs that, could, if left to their devices, be a little bit fire and forget, or this thing, I don't know what it's worth, and then 3-5 years time, all of a sudden it's worth this, so that's a bit of a shock.
Yeah.
And I guess in a limited environment, at least is that now you can.
You have that.
Every day the music can watch, but other scenarios, I would have thought that you would want to start to kind of tell stories, make some not set some expectations that just ensure people are on the journey.
This could also be something you have in your playbook, right? If you do it the right way, you say, if this and this happens, this is how we will communicate / not communicate. So you're a bit prepared, because obviously, like when the share price drops or the values go down, listed or not, it's also the time when you really need your best people / all people, depending on how you look at it, right? It could also be a time where you can re-motivate and showing kind of how good of an employer you are. And then you could even use it as an advantage to find other talent that are struggling somewhere else that are not that good, right? So it's a way of like surpassing more cars when it's raining in a race, right?
But if you have these external shocks, as opposed to being an internal reason why your share market price is created, two thoughts. One is it's astonishing how quickly the markets recover from the shock.
It is.
When you take any of the major bear markets, a year later they're higher. Also an opportunity for, I think you're right, for management to sort of step into the breach and say, look, this is an external fee, it doesn't affect us. Our business is pretty solid. Nothing has changed apart from the external world.
Yeah.
Keep your faith, keep your form, your shape, your discipline.
Yeah.
It can be really quite powerful.
Yeah.
But again, what we keep circling back to time and time again is hearts and minds.
Yeah.
Messaging.
It is.
Real leadership.
Yeah.
And to be across these concepts, David, you take it for granted how much you are across these concepts. Blending, stock pricing, market volatility, shares, issuing shares. These are huge range of things.
Yeah, so I think some of the a weakness in any program is potentially focusing on overly functional communications. And functional communications could be brilliantly designed. Explain, how to log on to portals and change this and change that, but actually is that really what we need? Most people are smart. Systems have come on so much and they're super intuitive. So do we really need to focus on that? A little bit like back to the conversation we were having. Should we be focusing more on that, or should we adding greater prominence to some of these other points?
Agree. Going kind of earlier in the cycle, if we go a bit back to like when you launch a program. So of course you have what sort of instrument types are we choosing? How would you kind of decide instrument type versus like the strategy, how you do it? Could you kind of think a bit about like what's the ideal way of going about it? If you come on with a clean sheet of paper and this is how we want to start.
Well, it is different depending on you and the PLC arena or fighters. Just because you could do almost whatever you want in the phone. Maybe a bit heretical, but I think it's all the play in how many firms in the private market. I've had a Bolshe CEO, shareholder, maybe even a founder. He says, "This is what happened at my last place. I would like it here as well, please." Because it worked at Bernard's place, or they understood it at the last place. They had a low effective tax rate at the last place. So you can't actually underestimate just people saying, "Well, I've experienced it before. I want this again," regardless of the fit. That's one truth.
Yeah.
Is that, sometimes,
Yeah.
but you kind of get a solution imposed simply because someone's had experience it. I mean, without getting too, he does in reality.
Yeah.
Often because of that blurry nature of the instrument.
Yeah.
Because not only the instrument, but it program everything else attached to the instrument. I believe a treatment, valuation, all manner of other gabbins, which becomes a whole life of its own, and can sort of drown out the story. But yeah, I mean, where do you start? You start with, what are the client's objectives? But it's more layered than that. I think it's more textured than that. The days where I would start saying that, I think have gone for me now. What I try and say to the team is, let's have a richer conversation. It's not just about objectives, but how do they feel about the business? That can tell you an awful lot. So I'm cogging this, David.
I think the instrument is kind of a second order issue, and it's just the means through which you deliver your objectives. I think the broader conversation is how do you work out what your objectives are?
Yeah.
How do you really pin those down? Because it's quite easy to, you could do a sort of good tick sheet about why equity is a good thing or this sort of arrangement, but why do you want that in your organisation? And what do you think it's going to deliver for you?
Yeah.
Then you can maybe get into some of the task stuff, maybe some of the other practicalities. But I think probably the issue is people are quite often looking over their shoulder to the firm on the other side of the street, but well, they've got that, so we should have them too.
Yeah.
It's probably not right to think.
No, I agree. And this is like kind of, you have a playbook or you have what's best practice kind of things. Like, are there any places where you feel like a best practice approach fails? Like where should you kind of attack those kind of approaches?
Well, a best practice approach to fail sort of suggests it's not that good. It's very easy to introduce complication. It's actually very difficult to resist it because a client says, I want this, I want that exception, I want that discretion, I want that, a bit of the waterfall, or that liquidity preference, I want this. And before you know it, you've got a whole spaghetti junction of different targets.
And how do you avoid that then?
Well, I'm old enough and ugly enough now to have very blunt conversations. But it comes back to the radical candor. I guess I'm confident enough now saying, do you really want that? Are you sure? And by the way, I've seen this play out badly 8 times. Really want to go down this route? But I have the benefit of experience. Being old school about it, I mean, term sheets. Clients all kick back about because they just see it as more lawyering and boringness. But getting the things mapped down in advance or of implementation at a very boring, creates a lot of problems. So that's one way. But also taking the client on the journey. I think in the world of AI, where any client can get any answer at the click of a button, I think the human being a proper co-rider to the client on the journey is going to be so important, which requires much better human skills to unblock those blockers. So the advisor doesn't just have to be a trusted advisor. I think you've got to be a bit of everything in the future, which is great because they're not just being the boring technician. They're going to be somebody who is empathetic, who's almost a therapist. I mean, I've got clients that 20 years old that still call me up and have a good moan. I'm not answering your question very well because it's quite a difficult question.
I can like one. This is a very very fresh example. So I had a conversation about vesting periods. I was challenged saying that we need to have like 1 year cliff and then monthly vesting after that. And then
by the way, is market. So my
it's
first
market.
Right,
Sure.
Market.
Yes. So that's like kind of that was kind of the argument that we kind of got. This is market. And then we wanted it very differently. So we wanted a 3 year until the first thing vested and a 4 year for the other kind of half, right? A 50-50. For sure, it's not market. For sure. It may be hard to communicate that to candidates that could get something else because it's a long horizon. Fully aware of that, right? But how do you kind of think, okay, for us to be able to really achieve what we want and what we need for this position to come in, we would need more than 1 year, and it will take more time. And how do you kind of stand up against then what's market practice and what everyone else do, right? Yes, you have a risk that
And it's tough because they're holding company offers.
of course,
So they're going to play you off against the others.
for sure. But then I think, like, how can you actually still manage to take that narrative and try to present it in a way which is what's needed for you to kind of get it through? I'm not saying it's the right kind of investing in all cases. I'm not saying I believe more in that generally, but I think in this case here, it was a company that it would take 3 years before the project that person came in, and it was a company that will grow in value and the way it looks before that. So is it then right and to risk that person comes in and sells off or leaves after 2 years and can then get rich when you didn't do the job right? It's hard to think like that on a case-by-case basis, but still it's important to allow yourself to challenge this kind of benchmark of what everyone else
That's
does.
right. I mean, market practice, best practice, kind of by nature, kind of gravitates to the medium and the norm.
Yeah.
So, there's a bit of drift towards the medium, and every situation is different. Every circumstance is different. Like, there's a reason why things are done in a certain way. Some conventional wisdom prevails and it's fine. But I think if it's an overlay for a particular organization, situation, and scenario, you've got to be able to say, well, I want to practice this bit, but it's not suitable for what I'm trying to do.
And it's also like, then of course what you need to do to compensate, okay, you may need to do some more instruments than what you would have done in the other case then. So you need to go more, but you do a longer horizon. And if you think as a company that you get more out of this and you manage to motivate that person to think more long term, okay, then you're kind of touching on something, right? But it's, again, this is not market practice and it's very hard, but it's like sometimes you just need to understand what is the case and go, not just say it, not just what's your objectives. You need to really go in and understand, like, okay, there's nothing happening here most likely before 3 years. Okay, you are super important, and then you have something to play with, so you can actually look on like the exit simulations that you get more in 3-4 years if you go for this solution versus a smaller package at a 1 year cliff and then a monthly listing.
Yeah, you sell the dream.
Yeah.
All these edge cases, what they ultimately require is you selling a vision.
Yep, for sure.
And why you should join us and not them. No matter really, it's all you are. Persuasion, isn't it?
Definitely. If we then think a bit about retention and vesting, how do you kind of... This was an example of putting vesting.
Oh no!
No. I also want to be part of it, right? Yeah. I want to be part of it as well. Yeah. So if we look at like misunderstandings, the way you see it, like what are the most common misunderstandings employees do when it comes to share plans?
Wow, see everything.
So, and in your case, what is the most kind of, when in NatWest there's questions coming out, like where do you see it hardest to communicate precisely, and where do you kind of have to go in and manually cover or talk or change things?
Yes. So I think I would say this, right? I think we do comms really well. I think we probably have, upper quartile, if not best in class communications.
Yeah.
But we always challenge ourselves. We're always kind of evolving, and all the stuff that everybody will tell you in this space about simplification, not using technical terminology, explaining things, different channels, to try to engage people in a different way. Do all of that stuff. Fundamentally, oftentimes this comes up because people just simply haven't engaged with the material. You can have the best home suite in the world, but if they're not reading it or not listening to it, it doesn't make any difference. So to be honest, it's really basic stuff.
Yeah.
Like sometimes people don't. We talked about SAYE earlier. So the great bit about SAYE is you get your savings back. Everybody knows that, right? Often you get people. I didn't realize the option was underwater. I didn't realize I could get my money back. I thought I'd lost it all. Things like that. I mean, all sorts of things that to you and I are just kind of really. And you look back at it, have you missed this somewhere because it's so obvious? And inevitably you have. It's just the person's never read it.
Yeah.
I don't know what we can really do.
No, I agree.
So it's things like that.
I mean, again, the other sub-theme that's bubbling away through all of this is just human nature.
Yeah.
It's really difficult, isn't it?
Yeah. It is.
I think we've got to be realistic as well, right? So we do this for a living. We spend all our time talking about it all day, every day. The reality is, how how much time does any given employee genuinely spend engaging with this issue versus their day job versus all the other things that they've got going on in their lives. So I suppose it's not surprising in a way, but I think we just need to acknowledge that, and that's okay. But I think that a large organisation like us, 60 guys,
cool.
I don't think it's necessarily through a want of or a lack of kind of good quality support or collateral. Word of mouth is great, fusion. I'm not really answering your question, but I think I think there is a common theme. I think these issues surface in many ways. I mean, what we do, which I think is really useful and practical, we've got internal social media channels, quite informal. People put a lot of questions up, answering very publicly so everybody can see it. So no answering the same question many times. My favourite is to refer people to other responses that they need to the same question. That works quite well. But also just the key thing was I actually prefer being able to surface these questions rather than sort of sip it.
Agree.
Not knowing them. So do you know what? For every question that is, ostensibly a little bit daft or a little bit silly, it's just one step closer to telling me that someone's going for it. So I kind of view it as a positive. I didn't really answer your question.
No. But if I then say, if you were to explain a bit like high level, what are the things you do throughout the life cycle, communication-wise, to your employees?
Yeah, I think life cycle is the right word. So it needs to be holistic. It shouldn't be transactional. You need that regular drumbeat of communication.
Also event driven, presumably, because if something comes out in left field, you've got to respond.
Yeah, events driven, but also kind of what events, what tangential events give you an opportunity? Is your AG? Do you want to talk about voting? Do you want to talk about dividends? And then what do you hang off the back of that? Rather than like you've got a grant, then you're investing is 3 years.
But do you do anything like in connection with grant or this event where people are kind of signing up and so do you do anything special then, or is it like more you're so used to it now that it's a rolling thing that it's just there, or you do town halls or put together something special splash?
We sort of grant investment rates, which will tag on a lot of the education content as well. We'll mix it with functional content. So we do them live, we do them over Zoom. Found this a good way to kind of leverage and get scale. Really well attended. We actually felt very really well established kind of pub. Started doing that a couple of years ago because we thought, well, it's gonna go. Everyone's gonna roll in last stuff. The participation rates.
I think there's a real hidden psychological win to town halls, by the way. Now, your idea of town hall will be massive compared to what I see, what I do for our clients, but we do town halls regularly. If we're doing a large MIP rollout, which is quite messy and fiddly and lots of different things going on, often with nominee arrangements and all the rest of it. That's a lot of people all going, what's going on? The other one is a deal. Got an exit scenario. What's going on? So where the town hall benefits, I think, and I always impress this on the client that we do quite regularly, is again I have a very jaundiced view of human nature generally, and I think most people approach these things slightly similarly. But you get everybody in a room listening in and they're hearing all the different questions. It really elevates.
And creates buzz. That's what you
creates a buzz, but creates trust. It creates that safe space, and then it really does dramatically reduce the backdraft, as everyone's saying. Behind the scenes, I'm cynically, this is all rubbish. We're going to be sold down the Swanee. They really have. I thought this is real, experience. They really do have.
Interesting.
Sorry, and another thing that works really well, and it could be formal or informal, but who are your champions? So who are the people that are going through accountables and answering the pressures? The chances are that colleague advocacy piece is so powerful. Or far rather listen to the person that sits next to them or related for coffee. Reading some email communication, however pretty it looks, or with a nice video, kind of talk, being a talk. So colleague advocacy, and just if we're competing for airtime with busy lives, busy work lives, etc. Just kind of create that kind of buzz and feel.
I'm sorry, this is a shout out to me and my team. Sorry about this as a pitch. But you know, I was saying earlier about the lawyer of tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's being an advocate today
Yeah.
for tomorrow. We lose that sight of that as well, as that we are also advocates. We are trained speakers. We're able to stand up, in open forum, conduct ourselves. And again, I think being a conductor in open forum as an advocate on part of the issuer is a really powerful thing. Not enough people think of it in that way. I emphasise that to my team all the time. And I think that is the future as well, where you have a proper
So is the answer then to give more lawyers equity so we can.
I have a last question here. So we are now in Q1. Year has just started. If we were to kind of give one general advice, a new thing that you've seen, felt, or whatever, if it's one practical advice of a company that could go out and improve their equity plans tomorrow, I think it's very hard to kind of get around it because it can be a lot of different setups. But if it's one thing you would try to distill it down to, what would that typically be?
So a lot of what I write and comment on is essentially, because it comes back to my sort of very bleak view of human nature and the future generally.
Finish on a high.
Can what you're putting in, does your operating model survive reality? Okay, that's from where I start. And what you put in may not be quite the same thing as what comes out. So if you see this in PLC land all the time. I do it all the same for PLCs. You regularly have policies. You have annual reviews. Who owns the policy? Yeah. Yeah, you are nodding. Someone owns the policy, and it gets reviewed annually outside, particularly in Remco to the outside of that. I would like to introduce what I call some sort of equity integrity audit, but most companies do every year because what they did at the start has probably something. So they do that integrity audit. It combines all the things I have in my head about best practice and what they should be doing, and they do that annually. That's what I'm.
So like annual change report on everything you've done. Yeah. Cool. Interesting.
I was gonna go take down a similar route actually. Inspect what you inspect, because I think that what you find out will be very different to reality. What you think is going on in your organization and what people think about how good your fans are, how good your communications are written, how easy it is to interact with your administrator. What you think about that is likely to be very different. In some areas you'll be over optimistic, in other areas you'll be overly pessimistic. So really listen. We talk about employee listening exercises all the time, but I just wonder how many people are actually out there doing that. So maybe that audit is a broader, all-encompassing audit, and we should always moderate on those. I'm not sure if we do that enough.
No, I agree.
That's ending on a high.
It's ending on a high, definitely. No, but thanks a lot for this. It's been great and good to do it on. I'll try again. Teuchters Bar. I'll practice. No, but thanks a lot, guys. This was brilliant. Thank you.